What the fuck is up, everyone? How are ya? Apologies we're late, thanks for being so understanding. Really does mean a lot to Jack and I that you'll take the time out of your busy schedules to listen and appreciate what us two fucking idiots trying to do for yous. So, really does mean a lot to us. Don't forget to share this episode. Might do a special giveaway shirt this week, because I think I'm going to make I've already done the stickers. I'll make a shirt. Going to make the old CVS sucks into a shirt. Might do the first one as a giveaway for the winner in the next breakdown for whoever shares this episode on the old social medias. So go do that. Really means a lot to us. Go jump on the old Patreon. There's going to be a special Patreon sort of little accompaniment. Well, I've committed to that word now. Accompaniment. Damn it. There's going to be a nice companion podcast. Yes, to go along with it. That's only going to be for the Patreon people though. So if you want a Patreon, yes, hello. That rattle was Newton. You want to say hello, Newton? Don't know if you heard anything. There's some ASMR cat action for you. Anyway, isn't this a rambling, deranged intro? Hope you're all well. Jump on the Patreon. Go leave us a review and shit. We'll send you some stickers if you do. Won't that be fun? Shout out to fucking Lillian's mate. Said I would do this for Sarah Hanselman Sarseny. What a fucking silly name, you fucking dumpster diving whore bag. No, not really. You're right. Anyway, alright. Enjoy, everyone. Love you. See you around. Bye. Say bye, Newton.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Sean Jeffrey.
And then I look at the age I teach now, and I still can't imagine children being taken from their homes. There is anxiety there. There's restlessness, just the triggers that are always there. Every time I see a white van, I always think instantly, it's not anything I want to do, it's something that automatically happens. And you have the flashbacks of the men coming onto the bus with the stockings over their heads with their rifles pointing at you, and you're just thinking, how could anyone do this? And how could we be even thinking or considering letting them go? I had never attended a parole hearing prior to, and it was just a sheer shock. We were told they would never get out. So that was what pretty much catapulted me into making sure that I go to these hearings and make sure that our voices are heard. There is damage. It's a lifetime of memories that will never be erased.
The editors of the Encyclopaedia Britannica describe the act of kidnapping as follows. A criminal offence consisting of the unlawful taking and carrying away of a person by force or fraud, or the unlawful seizure and detention of a person against their will. The principal motives for kidnapping are to subject the victim to some form of involuntary servitude, to expose them to the commission of some further criminal act against said person, or to obtain ransom for their safe release. Now, the first recorded kidnapping for ransom in America dates back to the 1800s. In the first reported case dating from the 1st of July 1874, 4-year-old Charlie Ross from Philadelphia was not returned, and the ransom of $20,000 was not collected. So clearly, the ploy required fine-tuning to become a paying proposition. To complicate matters further, the boy's parents had just gone bankrupt, although they did succeed in raising the money. Charlie was snatched along with his brother, 6-year-old Walter, from the sidewalk outside their home on Washington Lane by 2 men in a buggy. The kidnappers released Walter the same day, but Charlie was never seen again. And an ex-policeman, William Westervelt, was later convicted on circumstantial evidence. It seems that money formed an ancillary motive. Westervelt preferred to just drown the young boy for nothing more than kicks. Until the ransom demand for Charlie arrived, no one understood the reason behind the theft. Why steal a baby? Nearly 50 years passed before the next kidnapping, when the practice aroused so much undesirable publicity that in the 1920s the focus shifted to wealthy businessmen. Although just as valuable to their families as wage earners, the public did not miss millionaires as much as their children, and so the gangsters suffered less at the hands of the press. The poverty of the Depression era fueled the craze even further, with the New York Times reporting in March 1932 that, quote, abduction for ransom has become a big money crime, taking its place beside the liquor, vice and drug traffic among the prominent rackets of this country, end quote. The practice peaked the year before, with 279 recorded American instances, including the national catastrophe of the Lindbergh Baby kidnapping. The parents were deluged with 38,000 letters in the first week. In New York, a hysterical committee of 600 mothers convened to demand plainclothes police protection for their children playing in Central Park. And the Pinkertons Detective Agency quadrupled their operatives in a single week. Before the Charlie Ross kidnapping, the crime was not a specific legal offence. Since no one had committed it, there's no reason for anyone to have legislated against it. But in its wake, Pennsylvania enacted the first laws which carried the ferocious penalty of 25 years in solitary confinement, together with a $100,000 fine. And so, the legal ramifications associated with kidnapping were now beginning to be set in stone. The word itself, to kidnap, derives from the 17th century English practice of seizing children and transporting them as slaves to the tobacco plantations in the American colonies. It would seem that the American innovation to kidnapping was not to make money by sending children away, but to make money by sending children back. Australia didn't record its first kidnap for ransom until the 1960s, which was 9 years before Britain. This was the infamous Sydney Opera House lottery kidnapping, which is a whole episode in itself. Now, the media loves a good kidnapping story. From the moment the Lindbergh kidnapping case broke, the ever-hungry media was all over it.
Let the developments in the Lindbergh Baby case start a new drive to wipe out the stain, not only of that wanton kidnapping and murder, but of all kidnapping and crime. Let the justice dealt for this baby's abduction serve notice. America demands death for all kidnappers and murderers. Anna, the wife of Bruno Richard Hauptmann, tells you what she knows about the Lindbergh ransom. When did you first see the money, Mrs. Hauptmann?
I saw the money the first time when the detectives took me down to the garage.
Do you think your husband is guilty of kidnapping the Lindbergh baby?
I'm absolutely sure my husband had nothing to do with the Lindbergh kidnapping case.
Despite her faith, this similarity between Hauptmann's writing of baby in a letter to a friend shown on top and the word baby as written in the ransom note is considered incriminating. And now compare Hauptmann's hand-printed signature on his auto license with his name reproduced with hand-printed letters taken from a ransom note. The initials signing the note, BH, are the same as Bruno Hauptmann's. And now Albert D. Osborne, handwriting expert, states his views.
After examining the genuine handwriting of Hauptmann and the writing in the letters, there is no doubt, I believe, but this is the writer of the letters.
Here is Dr. John F. Condon, the Japsy of the Lindbergh case, who received the ransom notes that led to the payment of $50,000. Hauptmann, there he is between two detectives being led to jail, fine circumstantial evidence piling up against him. New Jersey, convinced he is the writer of the ransom notes on which the murder charges are based, is anxious to bring him to trial for his life. Listen to Governor Moore.
That the case will be investigated with extreme thoroughness, for we are also determined that the traditions of Jersey justice shall be upheld.
Bruno Richard Hauptmann, accused of the world's most horrible crime, stands convicted of handling blood money. Alien in thought and deed, he and his kind must learn America is no haven for criminals or murderers.
Now, the rise of kidnappings in America spurred Congress to pass the Federal Kidnapping Act, commonly called the Lindbergh Law, which made the transporting of a kidnapping victim across state lines a federal crime. The passing of the Federal Kidnap Act didn't slow down the lucrative business of kidnapping, though. 44 years after the infamous Lindbergh Baby kidnapping case, on a sunny afternoon in July 1976, 26 children boarded a stereotypical yellow school bus, which would shortly after be boarded by 3 masked gunmen. 11 hours later, the children and their bus driver would all be buried alive.
It was like a tomb. It was like a giant coffin for all of us. There were times we all thought we were dying. There was a van in the middle of the road. Its hood was up, and they jumped on the bus with their guns pointed at us, screaming and crying, overtook the whole scene. I was 10. We knew there was a plate that was sealing the van, and then we knew there was a lot of dirt. Again, everybody's crying for their mothers and fathers and wanting to go home and wanting to get out. I was still scared. I didn't want everyone trying to go out. I was leery. I thought they were up there still with guns. I was so scared I was one of the last ones.
Before their photos were plastered all over newspapers around the country, brothers Richard and James Schoenfeld and their friend, Fred Woods, were nothing more than 3 men in their early to mid-20s who had just come to a crossroads in life. These 3 young men had become intertwined back in high school. James and Fred had graduated within a year of one another. All came from wealthy families in the Bay Area. The Schoenfeld patriarch was a podiatrist, Fred Woods' father owned real estate and various businesses, including the California rock and gravel quarry in Livermore. Despite their family wealth, none of the young men appeared comfortable with the direction their lives were taking. James Schoenfeld worked as a busboy to put himself through college. His father had given him money to buy a Jag, but he wasn't able to afford the insurance premiums for it and had to sell the car. It would seem that their attempts at autonomy, to financially support themselves, were failing. The young men didn't feel that they would be able to achieve financial prosperity without making some pretty radical moves. Earlier, the men had discussed getting into the film business. They had come up with the idea for a screenplay about a perfect crime. At some point, though, they decided the idea would be more lucrative if they simply committed it for real. Later, James would recall that he had read that the state of California was experiencing a $1 billion budget surplus. He told himself that that meant the state could spare a few $1 million if it guaranteed the safe return of, say, a bunch of school children. It was early afternoon as the students from the Dairyland Elementary School in Chowchilla travelled home from the local pool along a narrow country road. The children of the Dairyland Elementary had just finished their second to last day of summer school. Now, few of the children dreaded the obligation of having to go to this summer school. Dairyland's summer program was fun and full of activities like crafts and swimming at the community pool. Some of the kids were even still wet from splashing around, and many still wore their bathing suits when they boarded the bus. They all boarded Dairyland bus number 1 and greeted the driver, Frank Edward Ray. The youngest of the children was Monica Artery, 5, and Mike Marshall, 14, was among the eldest. In between were kids from all different grades, 26 children in total. They had only just set off on their return journey when the driver encountered a stopped van. The bus driver, Edward Ray, noticed the van plonked right in the middle of the road. It had its hood up and it was blocking the route forward. Ray had no choice but to slow down and try to manoeuvre his clunky bus around the stationary vehicle. It was as he slowed the vehicle almost to a stop that the 3 men in pantyhose masks stepped out and forced their way aboard the school bus. As the first man waved a gun and ushered Ray to the back of the bus, 2 other men in masks joined him. They said little other than to prompt the children to move from the front seats. As one man stood in the aisle, the legs of the pantyhose dangling from either side of his head, the youngest child, Monica Artery, had no clue what was happening. She couldn't know what the men wanted, or how the older boy, Mike Marshall, would act with a courage that went well beyond his age to stop what would soon be one of the largest mass kidnappings in the history of the United States. All the little girl could focus on at the moment were those pantyhose legs, almost comical in their appearance, just flopping around on these men's heads, They reminded her of ears. Maybe she thought it was just the Easter Bunny. The first gunman took the steering wheel of the school bus and began speeding it through a tall bamboo thicket. The bamboo stalks knocking the bus and the students inside from side to side. The second gunman stood guard over the bus driver, and the third gunman followed behind in their obviously not broken down van. The school bus eventually reached a hidden ditch where 2 more vans were waiting. The interiors of all 3 vans had been blacked out and panelled with plywood to reinforce the holding areas. The children and their bus driver, one by one, were ordered to get out of the bus and load into these vans. Once everyone was loaded, all 3 vans departed the bamboo thicket, leaving behind the out-of-place yellow school bus.
The bus carrying the youngsters and driver from a summer school session at Dairyland Unified School was found empty in a bamboo-covered area of the dry Berenda Slough. There is no doubt the bus was deliberately hidden in the thicket, and dust on the seats indicated the 26 youngsters were not aboard when the bus was driven into the slough. The mysterious disappearance would also indicate that at least 2 people had to be involved, one to drive the bus into the slough and another to guard the youngsters. There were other vehicle tracks on top of the bus tire tracks in the sand. Many of the worried parents were waiting at roadside, while others kept an all-night vigil at the Chowchilla police station.
The California Highway Patrol are bringing down an aircraft that they have to patrol the highways. It's a very expensive aircraft. It's called a stall. It's capable of flying at extremely low altitudes at low speeds. It can almost hover, in fact, it seems. And they have radio contact with ground units. And we're going to take a map of the county, and particularly this end of the county, divide it off into sectors. And in cooperation with the ground units, we will have the aircraft fly, look for buildings, for vehicles, for any suspicious activity, any place where a large number of people like this might be in hiding, and then check it out from the ground. Then we're going to reconstruct the path, or the route that the bus driver most logically would have taken at the time of his disappearance.
Early this morning, investigators found some cotton swabs and gauze in a plastic cup about 75 feet from the bamboo patch where the bus was concealed. Again, the swabs and the rest are being analyzed, but with no clear indication now that the material is connected with the children's disappearance. It's been that way throughout this day. Lots of reports of vans and items from purses to knapsacks to clothing being found with no firm connection to what's happened. Command center for this search and investigation is the Chowchilla Justice Center. Assistant FBI Director Robert Gebhardt arrived this afternoon to direct the operation.
At the present time, we know that there's 27 people missing since about 4:15 yesterday afternoon. And it's our job and the job of the entire law enforcement community here in Chowchilla to find these youngsters and the bus driver and to make sure we take the responsible people into custody for this particular crime.
Is it a political act, you think?
That's speculation, sir.
I've pretty well got it figured out. I may be wrong, but I may be right. I think it's some type of a group that wants recognition and money, and they haven't asked for the money yet, but they're getting the recognition.
Ray, of Portuguese descent, was born and brought up in the area. The father of 2 grown sons, he ranches 38 acres and drives a school bus part-time. His brother described him to us.
Calm, easygoing, and he loves children.
Have you seen any change in him lately?
There's not a bit of change. He's just as hard a working man as he was 20 years ago when he went to school. Drove school bus.
How long has he been driving the school bus?
For about 24, 26 years.
He really loves kids?
Right, he loves children, and the children all love him. From grown-ups to big ones that he's went to school with all the way through.
How's the family taking this?
Very well. So far, they're here. I can't tell you any more. It's just one of those things.
School officials were taking no chances that the situation would repeat itself. School Secretary Nita Hansen was on the phone all morning, asking parents to pick up their children at the bus stops.
And I was that Mr. Dixon? And Mr. Dixon's seeing now. He won't let those kids off that bus till he sees someone that's an adult that's there.
Well, that's one reason I'm here. I hope that this does not become a routine matter, because if we've sunk to the point in this country where children can't go to school safely, we're in serious trouble.
No reward has been offered yet, and no demands have been made from the kidnappers, if indeed there are.
You're asking to meet with the kidnappers, though?
Well, I'm not asking to meet with them necessarily, but I'm pleading with them to communicate with me, and I'd like to develop some line of communication about the children. The safety of the children is important.
Word went out this morning for the non-denominational service at Chowchilla's First Baptist Church. Pastor of the church and president of the Ministerial Association, the Reverend R.S. Buskirk, led the prayer for the safety of the children and driver and a solution to the reasonless action.
All the reports are still speculative at this time. They're not ruling out anything, but they do not know. They have no hard evidence. They are bringing a dog team in later this evening to try to get the scent of the children and send them out through the county. Of course, the children may be nowhere near here.
There have been countless reports, rumors. Dennis again mentioned the knapsacks, the articles of clothing. And I think to a certain degree the reports that they've been found are authentic. I don't think anyone's made a connection between the items found and this particular case.
They got a couple of reactions. Well, you must be out here because of that white van, and that was the first they knew about it. It seems for the past couple of days there has been a white van in this area, but they're not sure if it was someone casing the area for a possible abduction like this, or if it could be a special minority program that has just started in this area and it uses a white van. So that is a firm thing. There was a white van in the area, but whether it has connection with the case, that's something they're definitely trying to check out.
I mean, in the last few years we've become used to terrorist activity in this country, unfortunately so. But what possible use could there be in abducting 26 innocent children?
I guess now all that we can do is to join with the families and loved ones of those involved and pray hard for their safety.
An hour passed, then 2, and then 4. By the time the vans came to a stop, they'd been driving for a total of 11 hours without any water or opportunity for the children to go to the toilet. Older kids tried to console the younger ones by singing songs like, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." If the kidnappers' intent was to remain tight-lipped in order to keep the kids, relatively calm, it did work. But once the children were led out of the vans and saw what awaited them, several of the children began to scream. One by one, the children were led to a hole in the ground and ordered to descend a ladder. Below ground in this quarry, a moving van had been dug into the ground, and all that was left was an open hatch on top. It was buried in the woods quarry so that the captives would be unable to damage or pierce the metal walls of the cargo area, and also to keep it hidden from view. To the children, however, it was nothing more than an oversized tomb. The men demanded the names of the children, along with their home addresses, phone numbers, and a small article of clothing, like a piece of a shirt, or, in Mike Marshall's case, his baseball cap. Under protest, they all went down the ladder. The conditions inside the makeshift cell were pretty brutal. The kidnappers left a paltry amount of water and only enough cereal, peanut butter and bread for one meal. Next to the food, a cardboard box had been carved into a toilet. Dirty mattresses were strewn all along the floor, and there was hardly any ventilation. Before long, the underground prison began to reek of vomit, urine, and excrement. Screams and cries echoed out from inside the buried van. When all of the children and the bus driver, Ray, were inside, the men pulled up the ladder and dragged a steel plate over the opening, weighing it down with some heavy tractor batteries. This was then all covered with some plywood and dirt, which only added to the anxiety of the occupants. But the bus driver, Ray, refused to give up hope. It was now 3:30 in the morning. The bus, which had long been overdue to make its final stop, had been reported missing by now, and the small town of Chowchilla was already spiralling into a panic. The local police were at a loss. Terrorism was mentioned, but Chowchilla had a population of 5,000 people, so it seemed like a pretty unlikely target. The press did remind authorities that a few years prior, the Zodiac killer in San Francisco had threatened to kill an entire busload of schoolchildren. Without encouraging, hysteria, the police said that they would take every possible scenario under consideration. The empty school bus was located at around 7:30 p.m, the night of July 15th, just hours after the kidnappers had intercepted it. A pilot canvassing the area had spotted it inside the bamboo thicket. Now, inside the bus, police found no blood or any signs of foul play. Pieces of clothing were scattered on nearby roads, and it appeared to be an attempt to confuse anyone trying to follow their trail. From Friday night through to Saturday, parents waited at home in what could only be described as a collective state of shock. All the calls to the police and the parents trying to get information, as well as the media trying to get through to get statements, all of this phone traffic jammed up the local phone system, and that proved to be very problematic for the kidnappers. They planned on phoning authorities with their demand for $5 million in ransom. So time after time, the young kidnappers tried making calls without any success. They were just met with a busy dial tone. Satisfied that the children weren't going anywhere though, and tired from driving the 100 miles up to Livermore and then back down to their hideout, they made a decision that, let's be honest, would really fuck up their whole situation. They decided to take a nap. Back inside the moving van, now turned tomb, things were going downhill pretty rapidly for the children and their bus driver. Ray did his best to maintain his position as an authority figure, consoling the kids and maintaining an upbeat attitude, but it was difficult. The dirt thrown on top of the moving van was heavy and the roof was beginning to sag. In the heat of the Californian summer, the interior of the van was easily over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's approaching like 40 degrees Celsius. Fuck that noise. Ray had no way of knowing whether the kidnappers had plans on getting money and releasing them, or just letting them starve or develop heat exhaustion. As the hours passed, a positive resolution was looking less and less likely. Like the others, Mike Marshall, the eldest boy, was tired, hungry and scared. But he was also growing indifferent to the consequences of making an attempt to escape. He's a testosterone-fueled young teenage boy. He's all, fuck this noise, try and kidnap me, motherfuckers. Ray, the bus driver, was he was initially hesitant, and he feared that some of the men might have been left to stand guard and might become violent if they were confronted. But Marshall persisted. He enlisted the help of a friend to help stack the mattresses that were scattered around the floor on top of each other near the hatch so they'd be able to climb up and reach it. Using a wooden slat from one of the box spring mattresses, Marshall started jamming the piece of wood into the small space between the van and the steel plate covering the opening. When he had enough room for his fingertips to squeeze in, he gripped the plate and put his whole body weight behind it and kept shoving and shoving, and he eventually dislodged the tractor batteries and the dirt fell in, and it took hours and hours. At one point, Ray collapsed from extreme fatigue, but the young teenage boy Mike was determined. They scratched and clawed and levered at their attempted escape route. Eventually, Mike Marshall heaved himself up and out of the tiny square hole. He emerged into the fading sunlight at around 7:30 p.m. The children had now been missing for 27 hours. One by one, the children climbed up the mattresses and were hauled out into the fading light. Once they were all out, they began running with Ray toward an office that was located nearby in the quarry. However, Mike Marshall ran into the woods. He intentionally separated himself from the group in case the group ran into any remaining kidnappers and he would need to go get help by himself. A very smart move on his behalf. Fortunately, the kidnappers had not bothered to leave anyone behind to guard the van. Not very smart on their behalf. At the quarry office, there was one man waiting around just watching the news, and he knew who the children were immediately. Soon the parents went from the darkest day of their lives to the brightest. All 26 children and the bus driver Ray were alive and largely uninjured. Their fear instantly dissolved and was replaced with a gnawing, biting anger. They wanted the perpetrators. Who the fuck dare kidnap our children? The parents wanted answers.
Children have been found. They are in good shape. The bus driver has been found. He is in good shape. There's no indication of any harm.
I never had pictures in my mind of anything awful or anything terrible. I knew they'd be all right. I knew I'd have... My arms have been around those children all the time, and I've talked to them. I've said, everything's going to be all right, babe. And this is the way I'm close to my children, and I just knew they were all right. And they knew I was talking to them.
The children are all right, the driver is all right. These words ended one of the most bizarre incidents in the history of the Central Valley. The 26 Chowchilla youngsters and driver Ed Ray were found in this desolate area near Livermore. Imprisoned in the body of an old semi-truck, Ray and the kids dug themselves out and went for help. The area was sealed to photographers as criminologists combed the cave and surrounding areas for clues to the identity of the kidnappers. The group was taken to Santa Rita Correctional Center and placed in the care of the FBI. Some suffered from overexposure, but considering their ordeal, they were fine. While parents and friends waited anxiously in Chowchilla, the FBI questioned Ray and the children. A bus was chartered. At long last, the trip home began. And then they were home, tired, scared, but safe.
We had a lot of crying and begging for their mamas and stuff, but I kept quieting them down to see the guys wouldn't get mad at us.
Did you ever find out why they were doing this?
No, sir. I wouldn't let them live if I could get a hold of them.
And we had food and stuff, so we could be down there in those restrooms and stuff. I thought they were just had an urge to do something, so I just went along with them. I wasn't about to go against that gun. We didn't, what do you want to do? What we did to you? And they said, no, you guys just shut up and sit down there. And we was scared and everybody was crying.
No, I mean, all the things I've heard about the press and the way you want to strangle people constantly over this thing kind of gets to your nerves. And all the way through this whole thing, they've always treated all of us, all the parents of the children, with dignity, with respect. We've never had them around our houses. They've confronted us and asked us respectable questions as though we're human beings, and we all appreciate it.
Luckily for the police, Ray, the bus driver, was able to give them quite a break. Under hypnosis, he was able to recall one of the license plates on the vans used to shuttle the victims to the quarry. He even remembered most of the plate number on the second van. Authorities matched the numbers to vans found in a San Jose warehouse that had been leased by Woods, whose father owned the quarry. A search of the Woods estate revealed a draft of a ransom note. Busted. But the kidnappers themselves were nowhere to be found. They had learned their plot was foiled when they woke up from their beauty sleep and heard radio reports about the escape and that all of the children had been safely located. Oops. So, understandably, they took off. Soon a national manhunt was on for Woods and the Schoenfeld brothers, who were considered armed and dangerous. Alarmed by the All Points bulletin announcing the search, Richard Schoenfeld decided to turn himself in after roughly a week on the run. Days later, James Schoenfeld was arrested in Menlo Park after someone recognised him driving around in his van. Frank Woods made it a little bit further. He was actually located in Vancouver, British Columbia. When it came to the attention of the media, and then subsequently the public, that all of the three kidnappers came from wealthy, respected families, it didn't really make sense. All three men pled guilty to kidnapping for ransom as part of a deal to drop 18 counts of robbery. They maintained a plea of not guilty to charges of kidnapping with bodily harm and passed on the chance of a jury trial. Prosecutor David Minier convinced Superior Court Judge Leo Deegan that the crime carried with it bodily harm, since 3 of the children reported some combination of either nausea, nosebleeds, and fainting. They were clearly trying to stick these dudes with anything they could. The charge of kidnapping with bodily harm carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. All 3 were found guilty. Each man received 27 such sentences, one for each of the kidnap victims. For bus driver Ray and the parents of the victims, it appeared justice had been served. Their ordeal, after all, had not ended with the safe recovery of their children. For years, and in many cases decades afterward, the kids of Chowchilla experienced crazy amounts of anxiety, including nightmares. They'd been locked in a dark, urine-soaked metal box for 16 hours. While the town was, stoked that they'd been rescued, and they threw a parade for the bus driver, and they took invitations to take all the children to Disneyland, it was very obvious that the incident would leave permanent marks. Life without parole was not a fate anyone in Chowchilla had a second thought about. Then, a curious thing happened. In 1980, an appeals court determined that the judge had been wrong to declare that the crime had included bodily harm. The nosebleeds, fainting spell, and nausea just didn't count. The kidnappers were still imprisoned for life, but this distinction meant that they were eligible for parole. Each kidnapper respectively was denied release at least a dozen times. But then, in 2012, Richard Schoenfeld was released. His brother James followed in 2015. Both had unblemished behaviour records while incarcerated. That only left Frank Woods. Woods had gotten himself into some disciplinary trouble, and he still remains inside. Woods was due for another parole hearing on October the 8th, 2019, which was just the other week at the time of me writing this episode, so I tracked down the ruling. Quote, "In October 2019, Frederick Woods was denied parole for the 19th time. His next parole hearing will be set for 2024. Over the years, reasons given for the denials of his parole have included his continued minimisation of his crimes, as well as disciplinary infractions for possession of contraband pornography and cell phones." End quote. In a sense, the Schoenfelds may have endured the consequences of their actions for less time than some of the children. Now adults, some have reported continued therapy, claustrophobia, sleeping with night lights, or refusing to let their own children board school buses. Remnants of a trauma they now experience more than 40 years ago. Ray did go back to work for the Dairyland Union School District just 2 months after the incident, driving the same Dairyland bus number 1. Along with Mike Marshall, he was the one primarily responsible for keeping the kids calm. Though he didn't consider his actions heroic, he was celebrated by then President Gerald Ford, who wrote a letter congratulating him on his courage. Ray passed away in 2012, at the ripe old age of 91. Mike Marshall, the young hero of the hour, was interviewed a few times over the years for various anniversaries or news segments, and he also never considered himself a hero. He was not, in fact, even supposed to be on that bus that day. His mother normally picked him up, but she forced him to take alternative transportation because she had caught him sneaking beers with a friend. The teenager who helped avoid a tragedy picked Dairyland bus number 1, more or less at random. The fact that this young teenager had been caught by his mum sneaking beers may have just saved the lives of 26 other people.
There were countless people deserving of special recognition over the past couple of days. Let's not forget the Chowchilla firemen who had to roll their trucks outside to accommodate the masked reporters. The Salvation Army, which sent its emergency canteen cleared down from San Francisco. And the CB radio people who pitched in with communications and lunch meat and snacks. And Pacific Telephone, Ma Bell, who jumped into the fray with 60 press phones and any number of special government circuits and mobile phones, cable from the Bay Area, trailered pay phones from San Luis Obispo, lines and circuits from surrounding towns, and some 60 operators and installers from the Central Valley. Even the back of a station wagon for 3-year-old Scott Miller, who just couldn't wait any longer. And somehow it all worked.
Born into money, it's not a crime. You can fool the people all the time. 900 dead in Jonestown. Rescued from a shopping mall, heiress with a little girl's soul. Do you think we'll make the papers? And we're searching for your daughter. And we're searching for your daughter. On Saturday, a childhood ends. Strange way to make new friends. She's lying in the basement. Black boy And we're searching for your daughter. And we're searching for your daughter. Lock her up for 60 days. Change her hair, change her name. Smile for the camera. Friendships about trust. If we trust you, then you're one of us. Live together, die for each other. And we're searching for your daughter. And we're searching for your daughter. Born into money, it's not a crime. You can fool the people all the time. 900 dead in Jonestown.